Thank you for joining us in today's Connection Point End Times News Briefing podcast. And before we dive into today's podcast, an update, I just want to encourage you to keep focused on the Lord one day at a time. Some days, as you know, will be harder and tougher to get through than others. But here's the thing, you will always get through it. So be encouraged, my friend, and know this, that every day that passes by, we are getting closer to the rapture of the church, whenever that will be. But we do know it's quickly approaching. So that's a word of hope for us and a word of encouragement. Anyways, on to some news items. According to the Jerusalem Post that came out the other day, had this article that talks about how Benjamin Netanyahu and Abdul bin Zayed, which is the leader of the United Arab Emirates, set to sign the Abraham Accord covenant and ceremony to be held in Washington on September 15th. It was only a few weeks ago that President Trump and Jared Kushner held a stunning press conference, an event to announce the Abraham Accord covenant between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And many thought it would take months to crank out, but it was only a matter of weeks. This is also, by the way, the first such accommodation between Arab country and Israel since 1994 peace agreement with Jordan. And do keep in mind, this particular accord is not the one that the Antichrist is going to sign, as Daniel 9:27 talks about how he'll confirm that particular covenant. The peace deal eventually still needs to be worked out, but it will be in place later on. But it is a major, if not a big step forward, since Israel has regathered back in 1948. And you can think of this Abraham Accord as kind of a platform, if you will, which the rest of the house will be built, according to one way of illustrating it. But as we mentioned from the Jerusalem Post, the signing of this ceremony, the Abraham Accord between Israel and United Arab Emirates, will take place on September 15th in Washington at the White House. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he's proud to go into Washington next week, as President Trump invited him to participate in this historic ceremony in the White House celebrating the establishment of a peace treaty between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Also, last week, when they were developing and talking more through some of this information, Israel and United Arab Emirates started to discuss about opening embassies in each other's countries during high-level government meetings in Abu Dhabi. And by the way, there's other countries that are also have a desire to do the same thing and opening up embassies in Jerusalem. Anyways, having a good relationship with the United Arab Emirates and other countries, for that matter, is important for all these countries to thrive. From a marketing point, resources, economic, it's helpful to have the support of the countries around it. And from a prophetic perspective and aspect, not sure how all this is going to work out in the end, but we do know in the tribulation period that Israel will be alone without the support of other countries. So it'll be interesting how all this plays out as time passes on. Also, another interesting report out of the Associated Press talks about how the EU warned Serbia and Kosovo over Israel embassy move. So the European Union warned Serbia and Kosovo on Monday that they could undermine their EU membership hopes by moving their Israeli embassies to Jerusalem, as President Trump has a surprise announcement about the change. Left officials in Belgrade and Pristina scrambled to limit the political fallout. The 27-nation EU long-held policy is that the Jerusalem status should be worked out between Israel and the Palestinians as part of a broader peace negotiation. And it's Israel's territory, not anyone else's territory, but that's a whole other topic of discussion. But in this report also talked about that Serbia, as a candidate to join the bloc, should respect that. There's no EU member state with an embassy in Jerusalem, and so the European Commissioner spokesman said that any diplomatic step could call into question the EU's common position on Jerusalem were a matter of serious concern and regret. And that's the problem with a lot of countries that are going to have with the European anti-Semitic position. If they choose to do this, if they choose to put an embassy in Jerusalem, it's not going to go well with them. And if a country wants to work with or put their embassies in the rightful capital, Jerusalem, they're going to have a huge fallout with the EU and the support of other nations for that matter. But in the end, perhaps we will start to see how the EU will start to form or join or be a part of the one world government that the Antichrist will eventually rule and reign during the tribulation period. And a lot more things still need to be taken place for that to happen, but we are starting to see things lining up as we speak. Onto a separate issue, and this is more of a social justice issue to some degree, but when businesses who try to be politically active or make statements or inclusive, they're always going to face backlash no matter what side or what they're going to push. And this issue will only increase as time goes on. There was an interesting article that talked about how American Airlines faces backlash after allowing employees wear Black Lives Matter pins. And this is one of the probably many companies out there that are trying to push this. But American Airlines came under fire after announcing that flight attendants were now allowed to wear Black Lives Matter on their flare and their uniform while on duty, has angered some employees, including some whose spouses or relatives are cops, saying that Black Lives Matter promotes or condones violence. Now, by allowing and supporting this movement in particular, you're making a statement. And perhaps you're being more racist because only Black Lives Matter instead of all lives matter, which would actually bring support and unity and bringing people together. If everyone is on equal footing, all lives matter. It would promote respect for people instead of one race versus another. On a side note, I've yet to see one good thing that's happened out of this movement. I've only seen violence, rioting, and destruction. And those who support this movement are only adding more fuel to the fire. They don't want to resolve things or work things out. What solutions do they have to solve this problem? I've yet to hear any constructive conversation that comes out of this. I've only seen violence. I've only seen rioting and destruction. And so this is an issue that certainly needs to be solved, but behaving this way is not helping. Now, part of the issue you do see with these rioters is they just want things given to them, this entitlement mentality. But here's the thing, every person has a chance to succeed in life. If they work hard, they get an education, do the right thing, stay persistent, regardless of what skin color you are. And you look at the professional sports, for example, or other professions, but in professional sports, you have the NFL and NBA and professional baseball primarily. It was hard work that got these guys there. It wasn't given to them. And if they can do it, anyone can do it. And that's regardless of what profession or career or job you aspire to. Nothing's holding you back. The only thing holding you back is perhaps the individual's lack of willingness to work hard, be persistent, and keep growing as an individual to be a better person. Now, I might be simplifying all this, but I'm just speaking from experience and observation. Anyways, going back to the airline industry with American Airlines or even businesses, it's hard to support them when they're pushing an agenda, their morals, or political motives on others. The bottom line here, and the point I want to make is, listen, if everyone was treated with honor and respect, you don't have to single out different groups of society from race or to sexual orientation. Everyone should be respected. And so we need to look at people as whom Christ died for, especially as believers. And we want to reach them with the good news of the gospel. That's the only thing that will change people's hearts. And it will change society. It will change the culture. That is the good news. The last item to bring to your attention, which we do from time to time, we do mention about the Christian persecution around the world. There was an article that came out that talked about the Ethiopian Christians killed during in a kind of a targeted genocide by Muslim extremists since June. So Ethiopian Christian leaders said that it was time to launch an international inquiry after hundreds of Christians were murdered, including pregnant women, including children and whole families, by Muslim extremists in parts of Ethiopia since the end of June. Barnabas Fund, which is a international persecution watchdog, and again, I highly encourage you to sign up to it, log on to it, stay informed of what's going on. But they report more than 500 people have been killed in coordinated door-to-door attacks targeting Christian households. The extreme, armed with guns, machetes, swords, and spears, have sought out Christian families to kill them. Children have been forced to witness their parents being brutally murdered with machetes, according to reports. Barnabas contacts were able to confirm the attacks in some of the towns throughout the country. It's been reported that some of the attackers even had lists containing the names of Christians and had received the help from local authorities in trying to find specific individuals who had been actively involved in supporting the church in the region. The report goes on to mention that Christian businesses and houses were burned down, vandalized, and destroyed by the extremists. Thousands of survivors had fled their lives, including the orphan children. Many are sheltered in churches and community centers. And a regional contact told Barnabas that still many live in fear. Christian leaders from all denominations visited the areas and watched the news, and priests where pastors were physically weeping in tears, listening to the horrors from the victims' families. There are government security forces that have been slow to intervene in the attacks that are being compared to the events leading up to the Rwanda genocide. Thousands of arrests have been made, according to regional reports, including local officials implicating their attacks. The Ethiopian Christians are urging concerned readers and supporters to contact their Ethiopian embassy to call for immediate action to bring a halt to the continuous atrocities. We will see the persecution of the church and Christians continue to escalate around the world. And we've mentioned the persecution of Christians many times, especially in the Muslim countries and the countries in the 1040 window. And we're going to see more persecution even happening in the Western world as well. Even the so-called COVID crisis, it's not a pandemic, but we'll just call it a bit of a crisis, has certainly had a end for churches, where you have a lot of states that just want to shut down churches as well. You can't sing, you can't gather together, so they're really pushing another agenda there. And then even when you start to, as a church, or you put some videos out there exposing the truth and what's behind this whole COVID stuff, or some of the other information out there that the mainstream media is not telling you, you get silenced. So that is a form of persecution, not quite to the extent that we see in these other countries, but they're trying to silence the Christians, to try to stop them from gathering together. So things are happening fast as end-time events are speeding up. So stay awake, stay vigilant, keep your eyes on the Lord, stay in the Word and in prayer. Amen? Until next time, God bless.